Addiction to sex, addiction to drugs, addiction to narrow conceptions of success. No real conviction, but addiction. And addiction generates the inability to engage in that Socratic critical examination, let alone bearing witness to something bigger than you. And yet that more and more becomes the dominant cultural mode. With a whole entertainment complex that just dishes out weapons of mass distraction. Just keep them distracted. Don't allow them to think too deeply. No, just bombard them with stimulation and titillation. So even high-quality relations become difficult to sustain. Begin to lose the very art of intimacy. I tell folk all the time, I grew up to be a militant for tenderness. Oh yeah, militant for tenderness. Old as Redden said, try a little tenderness, I took it serious. Young folk are told, say my name, say my name, say my name. There's not a whole lot of tenderness there. There's a whole lot of gentleness there. That's domination. That's conquest. That's cold-hearted contestation. And that generates deeper need for self-medication. Reinforces the addiction over and over and over again. And the result is what? Political helplessness, political impotence. You end up with two political parties, the Republican Party, cold-hearted and mean-spirited too often when it comes to poor people, and a Democratic Party relatively spineless and milquetoast when it comes to poor people, with both parties tied to Wall Street oligarchs and corporate elites for their money, given the amount of money needed in order to run an election. Not just for president, not just for the Senate and the House. And people who are hungry for hope. I'm getting to hope on the tightrope. Many of us did see some hope in our dear brother Barack Obama. Looked like he was Socratic, he had some questions. He's got that $1 million smile. Even with those beautiful ears. And he was courageous, he was visionary. And he said, we got to bring the age of Reagan to a close. Instead of greed running amok, he said, let's talk about fairness. Yes, instead of indifference to poor and working people, let's talk about compassion. Instead of the politics of fear that divide and polarize, let's talk about hope. Where did he get the audacity from hope? Well, from a black preacher named Reverend Jeremiah Wright. Of course, they had some tension. That's where he got it from. Jeremiah Wright comes from a tradition that doesn't confuse hope with optimism. That black people have never had the luxury to be optimistic about America. Can't be a slave on a plantation and folk break dancing on July 4th about freedom and liberty and be optimistic. See, somebody's not in touch with my reality. And for so long, the only way black people could authorize their reality was to do what? To steal away, especially the slaves at night, in a ring shout. It was against the law for black people to worship God without white supervision in the land of religious liberty. They had to steal away at night, hold hands, and lift their voices and say, we authorize reality with our voices. One reason why music is so fundamental for black existence. Because without music, black folk would have committed collective suicide long time ago. I know without Luther, I don't know what I would have done. Without Reason, without Adam, without Dylan, without Gladys, tattoo. My tattoos are like that syrup a little bit too much.
See that syrup?
Part of the same tradition, though. Why is that so? Why is that so? Because when the reality that has been coming at you is shot through with so much mendacity, you've got to create a context where you don't think you are the one going crazy. You don't think you are the one who's insane because of the levels of denial of those who are creating the reality coming at you. It's true for any people. It's true for women. A woman make a fascinating point in a meeting. Nobody says a mumbling word. Then a man makes a point. Oh, that was such a sophisticated formulation. Oh, that was just magnificent. Don't count. How are you going to sustain your sense of reality when that sense of reality dominates you? You have to create some kind of counter response, some counter sphere, as it were. That's where that audacity of hope comes from. The hope of the slaves for 244 years. And Frederick Douglass saying what? I am an ex-slave. I do not want to enslave white brothers and sisters. I want freedom for everybody. Or American terrorism with Emmett Till's mother, with her precious son Emmett, a victim of American terrorism, a victim of cowardly white supremacists in gut bucket Jim Crow, Mississippi. Emmett Till's mother, Mamie, what do you got to say in the face of American terrorism? You all remember that moment in August 1955 in Chicago. Robert Temple Church of God in Christ, the Church of God in Christ, brought the body back, kept the casket open. 50,000 folk marched through that church. 3 months before Rosa Parks sat down in order to stand up for justice. What did Emmett Till's mother have to say? Oh, she spoke on behalf of the best, not just of black people, not just of America, but the human spirit. She looked at her baby, tears, legacy of Jerusalem, human. She had questions. Dogma of white supremacy led toward the death of my 14-year-old precious baby. His father fought in the U.S. Army. It's my only child. What do you got to say, Miss Till? In the face of the world, all the cameras are there. I want to talk about that an audacity. And I don't have a minute to hate. I will pursue justice for the rest of my life. She didn't have to give her reading of the Merchant of Venice by the inimitable Shakespeare to know the difference between justice and revenge. She knew that hatred is a coward revenge against those who intimidate you. She refused to be cowardly. She said, I would rather be with a people and a movement who's defeated at the moment but still have their moral integrity and spiritual dignity than win and be a gangster like those who have mistreated and led toward the murder of my child. That's a great tradition. It's a great tradition. In fact, one of the questions one can read, you can imagine an American given, and he or she writes the book on the decline and fall of the American Empire. 100 years from now, 200 years from now, we don't know. Someday it will fall. All empires come and go. All democratic experiments come and go. We fight to preserve the best of it, but it will come and go. That's what it is to be human in space and time. But one of the things they're going to raise is, why is it that being terrorized for 350 years, these black folk never even considered creating a blackout tax? Now, this old Black Panther Party, no, they were just policing the police. They wouldn't kill the folks. They wouldn't terrorize them. Oh, the Nation of Islam, no Nation of Islam hadn't touched a white or Jewish brother and sister. Now, they've killed some Negroes. Like Malcolm X. Now, the rhetoric has been ugly. Sometimes the rhetoric is xenophobic. But that's not a black Al-Qaeda at all. What is it about the best of these black people? Socratic and prophetic. The legacy of Socrates and Athens. We got some questions for you, America. But at the same time, we're going to embrace your humanity even as you dehumanize us. We're not going to get in the moral gutter, even though you tried to push us there for so long. And the worst of who you are has been there.